And so he goes into mapping the Theodicies, and he covers here 6 different ones. This is on page 5, so this is a good in the hardcover book, so it's a good page to mark.
Yeah, and so this section, I really enjoy these types of things because it gives us a succinct, description of each of these attempts to respond to the problem of evil, right? And so it's kind of a great overview of all the things that have come about with regard to this particular issue, right? Here's one solution, here's another solution, here's another solution. And he kind of gives us this succinct summary of each of these solutions, right? And then, of course, he, at the end, kind of, he
tells you the answer.
Yeah, he tells us which one he's going to deal with, Right.
And that's on page 6, so... within the span of 2 pages, you've got the book. So he says, the following represents some of the more common responses to the problem of evil. And this first one is kind of one that I've alluded to, the free will defense. This is probably one of the most pervasive ones. And he goes on to say, this is the most prevalent response to the problem of evil. Free will is regarded as a cherished feature within our humanity, without which we could not be responsible for our actions. She's kind of covered a little bit in the previous book. Furthermore, without free will, we would be consigned to a cold and robotic existence, but this means that our freedom of choice results in both good and evil outcomes. And this is the one that I learned. This is my pithy response.
Free will defense,
There you go. You just say free will. You move on to the resurrection.
That's it,
So evil is usually regarded as a risk that God had to allow in order to grant humans significant freedom and responsibility. So if you hear kind of the middle knowledge of God or this open theism floated out there, God looking down the corridors of time, God having to handle or play the cards that he was dealt.
We deal him because of our free will, right?
And something out there has dealt the cards that he must have to, even though he's created everything. I'm exacerbating the issue, but that's the coverage is that we have a free will. We're able to make free choices independent of ourselves, and as a result, I can punch a person or I can give them a hug. And so that's up to me. God can't influence that. If not, it wouldn't be a free choice. And obviously I know that I have free will.
Right. Okay. So the free will here, the free will defense then says that evil exists because we have free will and we can do evil things, right? And God doesn't want us to be robots. And so he allows us to have free will and do these evil things. Right. The next one, so this is the next kind of defense of the problem of evil. He calls it the natural law defense, right? And so here he says God, the idea here is that God has designed orderly, repeatable, predictable laws to govern the world. And, there's good and bad consequences can result from the proper or improper use of these laws, right? So if I jump off the building, the law of gravity, right, is going to make a problem for me, right? Gravity, has stabilized our world, but it can be utilized in destructive ways, right? If I push somebody else off the building, right, the law of gravity will take an effect. And so it's not God's fault when I push someone off the building and therefore misuse one of the laws that he's created, right? So that's called the natural law defense. It's our misuse of a natural law that God has created that causes evil. Right.
So if Ayn Rand was a Christian or a theist, then probably this would be the one that she'd harp on a lot. The third one is called the greater good theodicy. God has multiple good purposes for evil in the world. Out of such evils come greater goods that could not otherwise come. These goods outweigh the evil that they overcome. Some good purposes are ascertainable and some are not. So some we can come to know and go, oh, okay, well, if I didn't, if I wasn't homeless for this period of time, then I wouldn't have met this other person that I grew a giant business that I helped to stamp out homelessness in my community.
Wow.
So it was good because I went through hardship, or it was bad that I went through hardship, but it was also good in the long run because I made contacts, I understood the needs and experiences, and ultimately what we could all come to see as a common good for all mankind.
That's right. A greater good came out of it, right?
A greater good.
Yeah.
So the fact that some purposes remain hidden does not not soundly argue against their existence. So why was this person struck by a car and the right side of their body was paralyzed, and they had a promising Olympic career, but unfortunately that didn't happen, and they ended up dying within 6 months. Well, I don't know what the purpose of that is. Well, maybe God can see the 6-year-old that sees that story, and from there enters into the medical field to then carry out experiments that lead to spinal surgeries that can help people that were in that experience walk again.
Right. So the point here is that just because we don't see the purpose of whatever the event is or whatever the thing is, doesn't mean that there isn't one.
Right.
And so that our inability to see the purpose doesn't defeat the greater good theodicy, right, is what he's trying to say here.
And sometimes people that use this run into kind of the issue of having to come up with a theory on the spot for every unknown good, for every known evil.
Right.
So,
and he's saying we don't have to do that with this one. Right.
The rape of Nanking, the Japanese go in and slaughter Nanking, the Chinese population. What good came about that? I don't know. I couldn't even make one up on the spot. And you just bring that up to me like you know what happened and what couldn't have happened and what was the result of everything. It's one of those things where it's counterfactuals within any conversation is really hard. Well, what happens if we didn't mask up, or what would happen if I went left instead of right when I could? It was equal both ways. The GPS told me to go left, and I decided no, I've been here before, go right, and something happened or something didn't happen. I walked this path every day for 6 years. I didn't do it today because I stopped to tie my shoe, and the person in front of me found the $1 million ticket that I could have. What if,
Yeah.
So the counterfactuals are always very hard in any conversation, and for you to have an answer for that is always a difficult spot. So maybe that's one of the issues with this one. So.
Right. So the greater good theodicy then says that God has multiple purposes for evil in the world, even though we may not know it, and he's going to make greater good out of the evil that happens. Right. So.
And two, I know we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but sometimes those multiple goods is a human good, like solving a problem, or sometimes it's someone gets saved out of it, or someone bad dies. Yeah. Maybe that's the thing. Yeah. So, the multiplicity of goodness is the possibility within this one.
Yeah. The third one then he makes reference to here is what he calls the soul-making theodicy, right? Now, this one was made famous by John Hick, the Christian philosopher, or at least he called himself a Christian. The idea here is that humans are born in a state of immaturity and must experience pain and adversity in order to mature, right? So God is in the business of improving our souls, kind of thing, right? The Bible indicates that suffering resulting from various evil circumstances builds our character, right? And just as a fiery furnace purifies gold, evil and suffering purify and strengthen the human soul. So this one is the soul-making theodicy. Why does evil exist? Well, because God is in the process of building our character and strengthening our soul. Right.
I know I've used this example before, but I always like it. It's you're reading Lord of the Rings, and at the very beginning, Frodo finds the ring, must take it to Mordor, and the eagles show up and take him, and the book's over in 6 pages. Whew, good. We've learned a lot. We've experienced it. The characters within the story have learned. We've learned after reading about it. Isn't that good that in 4 pages we learn that eagles fly? No. That's the great thing about the story of Lord of the Rings. That happens in 3 books, that pain and suffering happen to these people, but they rise above it. And you see Samwise being the hero of the story. Not Frodo. It's always Samwise that's the hero of the story. And, fanciful things and people forming relationships and elves and dwarves coming together and being friends, and that's that idea is the purification of the story of the human story of why it is because if everything's just hunky dory, then what is there to learn?
Kind of like making the moth, making it easy for him to come out of his cocoon, right?
Right.
He's not very strong. He's weak. He probably dies, right? But if he has to struggle to get out of that cocoon and fight his way out and that sort of thing, the moth is better for it, right?
But then in heaven, we don't have that struggle, and we don't. Heaven's worthless, right?
Well, no, we're perfect when we get there. We can fly.
There you go. We are the moths. The fifth one is called the best of all possible worlds defense.
Yeah.
So kind of if William Lane Craig is ringing in your ear, this best of all possible worlds is kind of a thing.
Yeah, the German philosopher Leibniz is the one that really made this one popular, right?
Which makes sense because Craig is a German studier. So I without a doubt is probably where he got this from. This best of all possible worlds defense says an omnibenevolent God would create only a world that was the best possible world that could exist. Yet this world is imperfect and full of undeniable evils. Therefore, those evils must be necessary for God to bring about subsequent goods that make this the best possible world. Mm-hmm. So God is looking to save the most amount of people, to minimize the most amount of pain, to maximize the most amount of pleasure, and he has certain computations that he can do while still having certain characteristics. Like he can't not exist. So, okay, so he makes a world where he's known. So how about he's always directly experienced at every waking moment? Well, okay, that maximizes pleasure, but it doesn't bring about people's maximum glory or what they can accomplish. And so they become robots. Okay, so God changes enough of these variables that he fits the world, and here it is, the best possible world out of all the other ones, where he says this is kind of almost the best that I can do. Where he says this is all the factors that I want, and go out into the world and go.
Yeah. So yeah, good. So the idea here is that, and this is kind of a logical type of response, mm-hmm. right? We know that God is perfect. We know that he's, omnibenevolent. That means he's all good, right? And so he would create the best possible world. Well, if the best possible world has evil in it, then obviously that had to be part of what the best possible world had to have in it, right? And so evil must be necessary for God to bring about, a good in that situation, right?
So this is the best possible overall.
World. Yeah. Number 6, he calls the divine judgment defense, right? Pain and suffering are the result of God's retributive justice, right, and punishment of evildoers. It includes the everlasting judgment of hell. And so God comes out comes out of judgment in the form of rehabilitation, deterrence, societal protection, and retribution. Right? The hope of ultimate divine justice readdresses the suffering of the innocent. So this one says, why does evil happen? Well, because it allows God to punish. God punishes evildoers, right, including in everlasting judgment. And so good comes out of this judgment because people see other people being punished, and so they're deterred from doing evil, right? Society is protected as folks band together to protect each other from this particular evil, right? And sometimes the person who does evil is rehabilitated, right? And so, this is so evil has a kind of a good outcome in this situation as well, right?
Yeah, the gangbanger who grows up hard on the streets, has killed somebody, is caught, goes to jail or flees, and then he comes to know the Lord. He starts ministry. He affects the youth of the streets and becomes the pastor of the street kids.
Yeah, or the person never repents, always does wrong, and then God has to judge that person, right? And so this is what this one is all about: divine judgment defense, right? God judges evil.